Thousand Year Eve. This story is about a man who has lost his father, who mysteriously went missing on New Year's. The man is eager to find his missing father, so he does whatever it takes to see him. This is his journey to finding his father.
It was Albert's first time entering a radio booth. It looked so ordinary. Even the offices adjacent to the disc jockeys' booths resembled those government agencies. A row of desks, clicking typewriters, worn out, obsolete computer in a dirty beige color, a batch of hardened secretaries. He also saw a gaggle of people shuffling around and waiting in avouched lines. Seeing the figure of the woman in one of the booths, she looked into the glare of reflection on the window.
I don't know what to do. I can sleep at night thinking that my mother could be out there wandering the streets. She was 68 years old, about 5 feet tall, with graying hair, and had worn a dress with blue flowers on the day she disappeared. We had gone to the zoo a week before she went missing. We decided to go there because it was a Sunday and animals fascinated her. After we had separated for half an hour, my mother failed to show up at a small rest area, which was our prescribed meeting place. The 3-hour wait ended in a search involving a gaggle of security guards.
She was interrupted by the announcer, who had a deep, booming voice. His tone was kind and concerned. You can see that it didn't sound tired, hurried, or irritated.
Can you please tell us more details about your mother?
She had Alzheimer's disease, which may have led her to forget where our meeting place would be.
Mr. Santos joined the people huddled outside the booth. He saw how small and the caustic boards lined the walls were covered with posters of movies, singers, and bands the radio booth was. There were also old memos and announcements inside. He saw the announcer sitting behind a panel, decked with buttons and sliding switches. He was wearing headphones and moving some of the switches. He soon recognized him as a television personality who had his own afternoon show, where in the show he would sit on a couch and fill the string of guests. That show had a little oval inside the corner that showed a woman performing sign language. He later then realized that the show was a public service program, a televised version of the radio program he was running now. He was then called by the staff.
Mr. Santos, please head inside the booth now.
As he approached the booth, he saw a little girl coming out, shedding her tears. He was also holding a piece of paper where he wrote down some of the important details he would like to talk about. Inside, the air smelled of cigarette smoke and damp air conditioning. There was a little 3-foot-high Christmas tree in the corner, with light bulbs that blink on and off, and a little foil hanging that said Happy Holidays. The announcer told him to sit down and took a long drag of a cigarette.
You are Mr. Albert Santos, right?
Yes, that is me.
The announcer switched on the microphones and announced my name on the air. All through this, he was turning the paper repeatedly in his hands until my hands and the paper had rubbed off on each other and shared the same color. I was folding and unfolding it until he could barely read the pencil marks. There was a microphone on a stand in front of him. He gripped the mic, adjusted the position, and began to speak. He glanced down at the paper without looking, without reading and speaking. His voice reverberated through the studio as he began relating all the details.
My father was last seen on New Year's Eve, wearing a strip-collared shirt, jeans, and red slippers, medium build, black hair with white and silver streaks. He is 58 years old, missing, lost, or kidnapped since New Year's Eve, which was 4 days ago.
The announcer looked at him briefly, perhaps to see if he was done, and picked up the tail end of his fading announcement with a loud burst that was meant to add excitement to the case. The announcer looked at him as he spoke and recognized that he was giving him words of encouragement, telling him to leave his name and contact numbers on the master list outside.
Don't worry, Mr. Albert. I am pretty sure that many kind hearts will help us in finding your father. Please don't lose hope in finding him. There is no one other great love than a father's love. Please leave your contact details in the master's list outside for those people who want to help you.
Thank you so much. This will be a huge help for us.
Then the announcer switched his gaze to other matters. The control panel in front of him, the cue cards passed to him by an assistant. As he looked away, he added that Albert would know in a few days. Albert stood up, afforded the announcer a nervous smile, but he had turned to his list and was calling for the next guest. He saw outside another line of people, all waiting to sign the master list, and walked out of the office.
Thought it was his first day of work after the holidays. Everybody knew that Albert's father had gone missing. Albert and his wife had made sure to call everyone over the past few days. By New Year's morning, they had gone through the list of friends and neighbors, people they knew to know his father. By the next day, they had gone even through those who didn't know his fathers. Albert's father was a loud, gregarious man, and it was not unusual for him to call one of his friends, out of the blue, for a chat or a drink. Albert's office was still slumbering in the holiday spirit when he timed in, with only a handful reporting to work. His cubicle, normally unadorned, except for a wall calendar and appointment book, was cluttered by Christmas gifts from his co-workers. He turned on his computer, mindlessly sifted and reorganized files, looked at the time, and made a few tentative calls. When lunchtime came around, someone came over to his cubicle and invited him to lunch.
Hey bud, wanna have some lunch at the canteen? Our colleagues are already there.
Sure, no problem. I'll be there.
Okay, come down quickly, bud.
Yes, of course. I'll just grab my stuff and I'll come right away.
They chose to have lunch at the company canteen, a few floors down. The company had set aside half an entire floor as a dining area, brightly lit and nondescript. A long stainless steel counter ran the length of the canteen, and although it was past noon, only a few people were lined up along the railing.
Over lunch, they asked him what had happened. He heard his voice once again telling them, over the din and the soft music, with an accuracy that startled him, every detail of our separation.
Hey Albert, are you okay now? I heard that something terrible happened to your father.
Yeah, I heard that too. I was also worried about your situation.
My father went missing on New Year's Eve. I mysteriously don't know what happened. It all came in a flash. We tried searching and searching, but not even a single clue came out.
Is it okay if you narrate to us what happened? I want to help you if there are any clues in your story.
Well, this happened on the day of New Year's Eve. After a small dinner, my father, my wife, and child went to bed to rest before the festivities. I sat in the living room watching TV and drinking beer. An hour before midnight, my father appeared and sat with me. He said nothing, merely coughing a little now and then. Some minutes later, my wife emerged with the baby. She frowned at us sitting there and immediately went into the kitchen to prepare. My wife had wanted to take our 1-year-old child up to the beach in Ilocos, where her family would be staying, and Christmas and New Year's would be light and cold.
Palangga, I want to go home to Ilocos with Anna. My family will be staying there for a while.
Sure, I'll book some reservations for the hotel room.
Thank you, Palangga. I love you.
Anything for you, Planga. I love you too. After a while, My father and I took 4 tires from our garage, rolled them out to the street, piled them carefully in the middle, sprinkled a little kerosene, and set the whole thing on fire. By that time, our entire road was studded with tire bonfires and lined with people who had come out to watch with the explosions and count the minutes. The whole street was filled with fire and smoke by 5 minutes to midnight. My ears were ringing, and a thick fog of gunpowder smoke hung. My father had changed from his pajamas into a stripped, long-sleeved shirt and jeans. As the firecrackers split open in the fire, my father looked at me and he said something I could not hear. From the corner of my eye, I thought I could see my father walking up the street, picking a path among the flares of fountain, the shockwaves of homemade bombs, and the sibilance of rockets shooting into the sky. I saw this from the corner of my eye. I didn't bother to call out to him because I think harder about it. I had believed that it wasn't him. It was someone else walking down the street.
They had mysteries like this day in, day out at the radio station, at the police precinct, at the barangay hall. In fact, all these places and cases so closely resembled another that the pictures of the dead and missing, the telephone numbers to call, and the people to ask for on the phone, these names and things all vibrated into each other and began to look the same. At the radio station, there was a man who was calling out to his older brother, who had neglected to send money from Kuwait, where he worked as an engineer.
Please help us. My brother has neglected us sending money. He is in Kuwait, where he works as an engineer. There was an old woman who cried for justice for her son, who had been raped and beaten to an inch of his life, and whose pulverized joke could not even accommodate a whisper of the name of his attacker.
My son has been beaten and raped and is fighting for his life that he can't even whisper the name of his attacker. Please, I beg you, help us seek justice for him.
In the taxis he rode, the radios were constantly tuned to the AM band, where the mystery show aired in the mornings and in the afternoons. Occasionally, breaking news came through the airwaves involving phone calls from lawyers offering help or concerned citizens reporting the whereabouts of those lost and those who had run away. There were agencies and offices and even individuals out there who concerned themselves with the lost and the disappeared and the uncollected. He had earlier tried to solicit their help, but they told me the sheer volume of their clientele meant he might be attended to in many weeks. At that, he resolved to do my own searching. By the end of the second week, his father was still missing, and he had almost grown desperate, but decided that it would be too late to go back to the help agencies. His wife had delayed her move to Ilocos in the meantime. Whenever he got home, often very late after long hours at work, and a slow, thoughtful reconnaissance around our neighborhood streets, he would be mildly surprised to still find her in her room, sleeping with the baby in her arms. He would sit and watch TV in the living room and discover that the persevering presence of his family had a difficult, grating character. By the time he realized he had owed her more than he could ever hope to repay and repair.
During those moments, he agonized over the unanswered questions.
Where did my father possibly go? This is killing me. I have no clue whether he's dead, killed at midnight by an explosion, a stray bullet falling from the sky, or a rocket veering, of course, to strike father, or he is a victim of a crime, such as an assassination or kidnapping. No, that can't be. How can I imagine such horrible things?
He shrugged off these possibilities as too impossibly fantastic. Surely the key to his father's disappearance lay in the circumstances more spectacular. He took to scouring the papers for any news of salvagings and unclaimed corpse. He was thankful for finding no such news and decided that such a savage crime could not happen to his father. They were not exactly rich folk, and his father did not maintain a high position anywhere. If he was anything, he was simply and merely his father. It would have been a case of mistaken identity.
Albert still went to the newspaper to report. A reporter asked him about the incident and, tired from the end telling,
Good day, Mr. Santos. Can we know what happened to your father? It has been reported that he went missing on New Year's Eve.
Yes, he went missing for some unknown reasons.
Unknown reasons? Can this be possible?
I'm quite sure that he had disappeared from a distance, and from that day we haven't even seen his shadow.
In a few days, a small article appeared in the broadsheets, repeating Albert's words, tucked under the bigger news of the current political expose. It also appeared in the tabloids, where it graced the pages where the small, sensational crimes of the day were reported.
More than once, Albert thought it occurred to him that he might have faked his disappearance, that he might have walked away from the disintegrating life and marriage in order to save it, or that he had turned an old pair of eyes upon himself and seeing an old man growing older and unneeded in his son's household, decided to skip town and join his old gang in a journey to points unknown. After all, Albert seemed to remember that he had a thoughtful look in his eyes on the night he disappeared. Albert knew that such possibilities were very clear to his wife Marielle. After all, she had known his father all these years and she had come to know everything he was as much as she knew about his son. It was becoming an unsolved case.
A friend of a friend knew of a medium who specialized in lost items, and wondering whether Albert's father would count as a lost item, I contacted him.
Hello. If that is the case, can you do me a favor and bring some of the items that your father has?
Sure, I'll see what I can find.
Albert could not bring anything very substantial, since his father had brought his wallet, put on his only cap, worn the watch that Albert had given to him many years before, and taken his only pair of shoes with him. He only managed to present a very old pair of bathroom slippers to the medium. The medium himself was an old man who wore a dingy robe whenever he performed his readings. He clucked his tongue and declared that the item I had brought would certainly not do much, but added quickly to that he would try, slapping down a worn-down deck of Spanish cards on the table.
I'm sorry, but this is the only item I have that belonged to my father.
I see, but I am not sure how this item can help us. I will try to use my Spanish card.
He made reshufflings and rereadings and offered several vague guesses about my father. Then he glared at me and decided that the old man might not be in the realm he was searching for, or that he could be eluding his third eye. For a fee, he agreed to perform periodic searches in the ethereal plane and assured me that if my father wanted to contact me, he would find a way.
That night, Albert dreamed of finding his father.
I dreamed. It was a clear night, like the night he disappeared. Except there were no fireworks, nothing in the sky, not even the moon or the stars. In my dream, he wanted to return and to signal his intention. He lit the fireworks he had brought with him. Each rocket burned perfectly, and burst perfectly in the night sky, exploding cleanly, like 5 exclamation points. In my dream world, the phone rang. "We found your missing relative." I dressed quickly, feverishly, even forgoing my pants and socks. But when I arrived at the station to claim him, they showed me a different old man, sitting on a chair and sipping coke from a small plastic bag. On the table beside him lay a half-eaten sandwich. In dreams, it seems food is always half-eaten, and everyone, especially the dreamer, is almost always half-dressed. In dreams, there are only half discoveries, In dreams, we expect to be tricked and are constantly jumping, awaiting the strange twist or the inevitable fall. In the event of the latter, even a peaceful death had denied us, and we awake, sweat and eyeballs still moving, as we spend the first waking moments trying desperately to remember our dream lives or wondering if death in dreams provokes a real death. Everything is soon forgotten, and we move and live in the natural world.
The morning Albert awakened and there were bright, oxygen-rich with sounds of his wife and child in the next room.
He had dinner with my wife on the eve of her departure for Ilocos. She had prepared a simple meal, spare but thoughtfully prepared and accompanied by wine, as we had always had in the beginning. We did not speak at first, but after a few minutes he stammered a few compliments about the meal, and thanked her for her support during the whole affair.
This is truly a scrumptious meal. I would like to thank you for all your sacrifices, Palanga. You don't know how lucky I am to be your husband.
Thank you, Palanga. Of course, as your wife, I will always be here for you no matter what happens. I'm sure we'll get through this.
She smiled, and as she spoke I could see in her eyes a new clarity and a great hope for her future and the future of the baby. Still, Albert felt foolish enough to imagine that her pity for him and my continuing predicament would compel her to stay. Over coffee, she gave him a contact numbers and email addresses and offered an open invitation to visit, in which he returned her invitation. Some weeks later, he went to the radio station again, taking place in the line across the booth. He looked at the announcer expectantly to see if he remembered me. He didn't, of course. When it was his turn to speak, he discovered that time where he had rubbed down the details down to an old, dull, unremarkable list of descriptions that could have matched anyone's. Albert might have been describing the old stranger he had dreamed of. He might have even been describing myself 30, 40 years later. He imagined his voice filtering through the mesh gate of the microphone in his hands, transported through the wires. Albert imagined it bursting through the overhead speakers like fireworks, bouncing off satellites, picked up by radios and skimming off the minds of listeners, sitting in their cars and their afternoon reveries. The end.